Hunter
laptop
Biden
story.
laptop, which I have right here as a hard drive.
The Hunter Biden laptop story was not removed at the behest of the government, though.
Yoel Roth stated.
Yoel Roth testified 3 times in Congress that
testimony
no
that
reference
he
ever
said,
was made to the Hunter Biden laptop.
I will read, Destiny, I will read it for
3
you.
times
if
in
I
front of
You're
Congress.
right.
You can
Hunter
bring up
Biden's a
YouTube.
great guy.
I will read
Biden's
it
not
for
a
you
Chinese
if I have
agent.
to.
You never bring the
Right
goods.
there.
You just have a throwaway line, claim we're not giving it.
Sure. So the goods are that Elvis Chan, who was Yoel Roth's contact at the FBI, did not know that the FBI even had that laptop until the story broke, which he also testified in front of Congress about. He also testified in front of Congress that he did not, I can read you the quotes if you want the testimony, that he never brought up Hunter Biden.
So we're not
Yoel Roth.
sold out to China. Everything's fine, folks. Go
So what
home,
you're
go
saying
sleep.
is he was lying, so
Everything's
they
fine.
equivocated.
It's not lying. You're reading one quote and you're trying to read it in a certain way. We can look at the conversations that they were having internally over whether they should have censored that story or not.
Please,
China.
Alex, calm down.
China.
China.
I'm excited to have an actual attorney sitting next to us who knows he's a free speech lawyer. I mean, we need to. Have you noticed any total BS that has come out on stage so far, Adam?
Well, I guess yes is the answer. Although I'm still trying to get my mind around the idea of inviting a lawyer to a comedy club. But okay, I'll go with that. But yeah, there's been I think, as law professors would pompously say, much confusion in some of the areas of the law, and maybe we could talk about it.
So what specifically?
Well, let's start with the Twitter files. So, Twitter is a private company. It can do as it wishes. But when it acts at the behest of government, as the Supreme Court... Exactly. And when it acts at the behest of government, when it does, as the Supreme Court says, government cannot do through a private individual what it cannot do itself. And that's what we're having. The idea that Twitter, that the government just goes to Twitter and says, oh, by the way, would you mind banning this? And they look at it like that request like it came from you. That's not what's happening. The Twitter files show that almost half of the government requests for censorship result in action by Twitter. That's not a private entity. That's government censorship. And I think that's obvious. And that's not just me. In fact, a federal court in the state of Louisiana, in a lawsuit by the state of Louisiana and Missouri, alleging that Twitter was a state actor, has pretty much said that they made the prima facie case and is allowing the question to go to trial. So, whether it is true, we will find out. But the fact that it's dismissible or absurd is wrong. I mean, it's legally wrong.
Okay, so it's not dismissible and it's not absurd. The question is it happening? That's, I think, what we want to demonstrate, and I think that's what the Twitter files have over and over again failed to demonstrate, is the government making, not just any request, but is the government making an inappropriate request to censor something off of Twitter that it shouldn't be doing? And I don't believe that was ever demonstrated. You can't just say that every request for censorship is illegal. For instance, I'm sure you would agree, if the government were to bring to Twitter's attention illegal activity that's happening on Twitter, they are fully within their rights to make that request, and Twitter is fully within their rights to take that content down, should they deem necessary.
Yes, but this whole thing reminds me of the story of Henry Plantagenet, Henry II, and Thomas Becket, if anyone remembers it.
Man for all seasons.
Yeah, that's right. No, actually, it's a few generation before, but close enough. It's Murder in the Cathedral. Any case, yeah, okay, yeah. Henry II was surrounded by his highly armed barons, and he got in an argument with Thomas Becket. And he said, will no one rid me of this turbulent priest, knowing that his highly armed barons were all around there. And what did the barons do? It's like, well, this is a government request. Let's march down to Canterbury and assassinate Thomas Becket. Now, was it government speech when Henry II said, will no one rid me of this turbulent priest? Of course it was. And similarly, I worked in D.C. I was Assistant Secretary of Commerce for the National Telecommunications and Information Authority. I could see how pressure is brought by government to get certain actions done in the private sector, and we have to be blind not to see that.
Sure, but so if we have to be blind not to see it, it should be easy to point it out. So for instance, Twitter adhered to, I believe it was less than 40% of the requests that the government made for accounts getting taken down. For the ones that they didn't follow through on, was there repercussion for it? Were they actually being pressured? Did any of the internal emails make Twitter seem like they were worried about what the response would be from the government if they didn't follow through on any of those requests? Because I didn't see a single instance of any of this. Was there?
Well, there are two responses. First of all, government doesn't have to give you a specific threat to make you feel afraid of it. I mean, as Ronald Reagan says, what's the most scary sentence you can ever hear? I'm from the government. I'm here to help. So, I mean, I think the idea that you have to say, Twitter was going, the government was going to go and, imprison Jack Dorsey or make him take out his nose earring if he didn't censor these people. That's not the way it works. I mean, the way it works is I think generalized threats are good enough. And the point is, the way the government works,
But were there threats? Is the question. I didn't see any of that. Right. So that would what I think is significant is that the government, Twitter didn't follow the rules it didn't think it needed to, or at least didn't agree with. So it still had that freedom. But the question is, did government actually make a threat? Right. So if there's a law enforcement issue, you can see how they'd come in and say, hey, there might be some false information that could lead to people getting killed. Who knows? Maybe this minority over here is thinking about like what they did with the Rohingya. I think there was some examples on Facebook. But I don't think the government would be. You couldn't point to probably any threats, could you? Am I wrong about that?
Well, I mean, I think you could. I mean, when I talk to industry in that position, I mean, think of all the things the government can do to these companies. They can change their preferred tax status. They can change their Section 230 special status. They can what's that? Yeah, a little bit.
But they didn't do any of that, though,
well,
right?
actually, they threatened to at times.
But the Section 230 threats all come from Republicans.
No, Biden often talks about how we need to clean up the internet and they have to do more. It's a constant refrain from the Democrats is that
having to do more. Hold on. Having to do more to clean up the internet is far different than threatening Section 230, which I've heard repeated multiple times by multiple Republican lawmakers. I believe Trump himself has talked about Section 230. That is a huge conservative talking point. I think Jack over here has probably even talked about Section 230. That's definitely a conservative talking point.
It is, but the Democrats talk about it just as much, and they often talk about imposing all sorts of hates, and they have hate as they have in California, as they have in New York, hate speech crimes, hate speech laws against social media companies.
Wait, there are hate speech laws in the United States of America?
Yeah, one was just declared unconstitutional in New York State, and one is.
So they're trying to pass them, but there are. I don't. My understanding.
They are passed.
So you're telling me that if I go to a New York or some state and I tweet out like a racial slur, I can actually get criminal action against me?
No, the way the statute worked is that it required the platforms to keep track of hate speech, whatever that means, didn't really define it, and create lists of people who are producing hateful speech and have that available and disclose it. So essentially it was sort of a forced auto-doxing by these platforms. And that's what the Democrats do. And so you can't sort of say, the Democrats aren't going to hurt the social media companies. They do, and they have.
These are the ones, if I remember correctly, it's California and New York, and then Minds, and I think Tim Pool actually has Luke's
and Babylon Bee. Yeah, we just sued the state of California.
Right.
Because
are actually in the lawsuit on this law, right?
Exactly.
It's the path towards direct hate speech laws. They're basically requiring social media companies to have specific policies about these clearly charged topics: misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, extremism, and radicalization. None of them are actually defined, and this is currently passed in California. So it's a step in the direction of actually getting fined for hate speech.
So returning to the original part for Twitter, okay? So a lot of times we say things like it's nuanced, it's complicated. However, you're a lawyer, so I want you to break this down for us. I really want to know, when you talk about how there's this idea of a generalized threat from the government to Twitter that was prompting Twitter to act, Why did we not see any of that in the emails? No concern for lack of ability to act on a government request. Why did we not see any type of even implicit repercussion for Twitter not following through on banning accounts that the government would highlight as problematic?
Well, that's not true at all, though. You do see that in the Twitter files.
Where?
You see that in the people who are responding to Yoel Roth that are currently working for the Biden administration in the NSC, and the other one, she's, I think Buttigieg's like policy advisor at Secretary of Transportation, specifically when they were talking about things like the Hamilton 68 files, when they were saying, when Yoel Roth was saying, look, this Hamilton 68, to your point, was saying that this was just a bunch of BS. We don't think these are Russian actors. We think these are just conservatives. But there were people internally at Twitter saying that so Yoel Roth wanted to put out a statement pushing back on the Hamilton 68. This is in that, I don't know, tranche, you could say, I guess. And there were people at Twitter that were saying we need to think of the bigger picture. They were making statements like we need to be careful how we go back with this. They were worried about pushing back.
I think they were.
And also, if I could just interrupt here, government action is not shown not simply by threats, but as the courts of appeals have said, coordinated action. And I think that gets to Jack's point. We have a situation where those social media companies, they are filled with personnel who do this revolving door between the social media companies and the security states, or in those weird nonprofit organizations that play this weird intermediate role. And so, they are coordinating this action. And yeah, I mean, if I were an aspiring member of this like weird group that's censoring the internet, I wouldn't put it in an email. They're smart enough not to know.
Okay, and I love that you said that. So then we agree the Twitter files showed nothing because it wouldn't have shown up in an email then. But that's a markedly different statement than the Twitter files showed us that the censorship existed.
No, that's not true. I mean, something can show something explicitly and something can be shown implicitly.
There wasn't anything shown implicitly, though. That's the issue. There was nothing there.
There was. I mean, if I went to Twitter and I said, remove 10 posts and none of them will be removed, and the government went and almost half of them did, I think that, that's something there.
But the good faith question that I find nobody does here is what posts were removed and why?
The Hunter Biden laptop.
The Hunter Biden laptop story. Yeah, we did this one. The Hunter Biden laptop.
The Hunter
story.
laptop, which I have right here as a hard drive.
The Hunter Biden laptop story was not removed at the behest of the government, though.
Yoel Roth stated.
Yoel Roth testified 3 times in Congress that
testimony
no reference ever was made to the Hunter Biden laptop.
I will read Destiny. I will read it for you.
3 times.
No, you're right. Hunter Biden's a great guy.
I will read
Biden's
it
not
for
a
you
Chinese
if I have
agent.
to.
Everything's fine.
Here we go.
Your destiny lies with me, Skywalker.
And it's very simple.
I'm back in 2016. We can scream if you want. It's fun. That's all good.
It's very simple. I'll pull it up on Twitter.
Hey, I was just up there hanging out with your wife. She's a nice lady.
Jesus Christ. We're really what?
No, that was your wife.
Are we allowed to pull people up from the audience?
My wife was hanging out with her too. No, I mean.
Well, I was hanging out with her first.
That's right. Jack already hung out with him. And then I was there. That's always better, like to be like third.
I appreciate you stalling while I could look this up.
No, seriously, your wife's a really nice lady.
Yeah, I wish we were here tonight, but she's not. She's fine with the kids. So he talks about, this is the FEC statement that he made December of 2020 after being sued by the RNC. And the RNC sued, and they said the takedown of this laptop, which I think, can we all at least agree that was censorship, right?
Yeah. Of course.
Right?
It was election meddling.
That enabled an election interference, information that was prevented from being received by the American people.
That the FBI knew was real.
So here's what Yoel Roth said. During weekly meetings with federal law enforcement agencies, he specifically mentions the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and industry peers. They communicated they expected hack and leak operations by state actors might occur in the period shortly before the 2020 presidential election, likely in October. I was told that the intelligence communities expected that the individuals associated with political campaigns would be subject to hacking and disseminated over social media platforms, including Twitter. And I also learned in these meetings that the rumors that a hack and leak operation would involve Hunter Biden. And then it just goes through and says there.
That's true. However, later on under oath, he clarified that exact statement,
Which is perjury, and he should go to jail for that.
That's not perjury.
That's perjury.
He gave that quote.
Hey,
he said
America
I'm
didn't sell out
with
to
you. He
China.
definitely perjured
Yes,
himself.
and he's right. We didn't sell out to China. Everything's fine. We're all going to buy our electric vehicles from them and our solar panels. We've been screwed by the globalists in China.
Let him rebut. Let him rebut, please.
China.
Alex, calm down.
China.
China. Calm down, Alex. Thank you for your vote.
I went to Xi Jinping. He gave me hundreds of billions of dollars.
Destiny has a rebuttal, please.
Later on under oath, Yoel clarified that any references made to Hunter Biden were from other social media representatives. It did not come from the government. There was
He
never.
says right
there was
here that it
never.
came from-
There's
I understand
audio
you have
recordings
that
with
one
Hunter
quote.
going, I work with the head of Chinese intelligence, Dad. They arrested me. What are we going to do?
That's a bad Hunter Biden impersonation.
Okay.
He's got more soda in his voice.
Can't do Hunter Biden impersonation.
Hunter
That's
Biden
a crack pipe
laptop
here
is
right now,
not
so.
real, folks.
I don't see any crack pipe stains on your fingers. Now, I have a question, because I'm more of a novice with this stuff. You guys get
But I
deep
mean,
in the weeds.
he says it straight up in this testimony.
And the
He
point is,
clarifies 3 times under oath later on that the request did not come from the government. It did not. There was not a specific request
it says
from the government.
It says right
I understand
here.
you can read that one quote all you want.
The
but 3
point
times
is,
later on,
again,
in
let
the
him
line of
talk
Congress,
for a
under
minute.
oath,
this
This is the head
argument
of
is
Twitter.
beside
This
the
is
point.
the guy who censored the election. I think that
as a
quote's
legal
pretty
matter,
important.
this is beside the point. I mean, it doesn't matter. You don't have to say, if you don't do 1, 2, 3, and the government's going to punish you, and you have to show that direct threat in order to get government action. That's one way to do it, but you can also show it through coordinated action. And I think anyone looking at the whole gestalt obviously sees that's what's going on if you're fair with the evidence. And that is what a jury is going to determine in a few months in some of the law cases that have been brought against Twitter in the United States government.
I guess the question is, where is the retribution from the government? Like implied or general or whatever. Like, what is it? Like, point to one.
What would the
anything.
retribution be for they committed the censorship? Why would they need to?
But they didn't. They most
The
of the
FBI
time
called
they
up and
rejected.
said, we want you to suppress this. The Russians created it. It may be fake. And they knew it was real 2 years before. Period. Case closed.
But every administration.
Which actually, to Alex's point, the FBI already had this, so they knew it was real.
You didn't know
at
if
the time.
every single person in the FBI or the FBI guy coordinating with Twitter knew that they had that hard drive.
It's a pretty specific
The
request.
FBI liaison to Twitter said it's not real when they knew it was real.
They did not say that to Twitter.
Look,
They said, we believe this is Russian disinformation. You should suppress it.
Yeah, this came out in the Louisiana lawsuit when Elvis Chan was meeting. So Elvis Chan is the FBI agent meeting with Yoel Roth and others, Vijaya Gadde at Twitter and others. They specifically talked about this Hunter Biden hack and leak operation as if it was fake information, yet he testified that he knew that the FBI at the time had recovered in 2019 the actual, and still we presume they still have custody of the actual laptop that was left in Delaware.
And what amazes me is the way the liberals have changed on this. I mean, when I grew up, no self-respecting Democrat or liberal would be comfortable if the CIA and they didn't have Homeland Security there, but wherever government officials were sitting with the New York Times editorial board and telling them what stories to cover. No liberal. I grew up in a very liberal environment. They would be horrified.
Flip out.
They would flip out. Now, however, they're like, yeah, let's go do it. Oh, it's simply because there wasn't a death threat from DNI or CISA.
But you did have administrations like Lyndon Johnson calling the Chicago Sun, et cetera, and telling them to hold on to stories.
Yeah, they did, and
right.
people criticized it. They thought it was wrong. And what has happened to the left that no one says it's wrong anymore? That's the problem.
Well, I mean, every administration has done their best to try to manipulate the press to their ends. Right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
my question is, it seems to me that this is an economy of influence. So if you have social media companies, just like if you have media companies in general, whoever's in power is going to do their best to get an angle and make sure that they're covered favorably versus unfavorably.
But they've got an angle of the 800-pound gorilla where they're dominating all the
How do you
discourse.
avoid that? We've never been able to avoid that. I'm wondering if you're going to have these private companies and they're going to sway one way or another, right? If it seems to be that most of the young people at Google and these companies tend to lean, let's just say, left in general, right?
98%.
It's hard. It's very difficult to then change that with a law.
So
right?
just let the public
what would
see
you
it
say?
all.
Right. So
Let us decide.
Actually, there is a law.
Okay.
It was passed by the great state of Texas. Thank you very much. HB 20, which prohibits viewpoint discrimination by the social media companies. So that means that they can't kick people off because you're Republican or you have political views that
That's fair.
Jack Dorsey says, and that's fair.
Well,
It's the same rule that applies to this comedy club.
Right.
Yeah, right. They can't kick you out because you're black or you're Jewish or you're gay. And the same way, social media companies shouldn't be able to kick you out because you're Republican.
And this is a key difference, because what you mentioned was newspapers, right? But a social media company is not a newspaper. It is fundamentally different. A newspaper has an editor, they have reporters, they have people who are deciding, and some sort of hierarchical process determining
Their
okay, what's
utility
on the front
under law.
page. But a social media company is closer to a communications platform. So it's closer to you using, I would argue, and this is more, I guess, philosophical than legal, but I would argue it's closer to you picking up your cell phone and calling somebody, or I guess
It's a
texting
utility.
somebody.
Right,
So the social media company
that's a good point.
comes more than that.
Because one of the defenses I've heard, even from the right, is the idea that Twitter was a private company and it wasn't the public square, even though it was treated that way. So that would be an effective defense, it seems. I don't agree. I think that they did seem to have a bias, but for the most part, they could still claim they're a private company. That algorithm was created by someone like Jack Dorsey, whoever.
But they were being directed by government consortiums and secret think tanks on dashboards on what to censor. That is government corporate collusion. That is fascism by definition.
Right, and then so the question before us is, we can go back and forth all day about, did they break specific laws? Did they violate the First Amendment? Some people would argue yes. Some people might disagree because you don't see it in this specific email. Got it, cool. But the bigger question, I think, going forward is, okay, we can't put the genie back in the bottle of social media or whatever comes next in terms of social intercommunication, right? We're going to have, VR is probably the next level, Oculus, all of the metaverse, all these different things. So we've got to come up with some way as a society, right? If we want to have individual liberty, if we want to have freedom, if you want to continue to have freedom of speech, and by the way, especially in the weeks right before a major presidential election, right? So it's also the repercussions here. This isn't like, somebody posted, like Alex Jones posted a meme and he got banned for 12 hours. This is actual information that was prevented from getting to the American people.
But the biggest problem, I think, is not, I think it's taken care of itself. There are Rumble and all these different platforms are coming up, Minds. But my worry is that no one can agree on a fixed point of truth. Nobody can agree even on the sources.
So why should we?
Information. Sorry?
So why should we?
Right. I mean, it's like...
I couldn't.
That's why the
saying
Wild West
why
is what
should
we
we?
want.
Well, I worry, though, that we can't, it's very difficult to even agree on what the truth is. So if I were to say, well, here's what I think, and then you said, where'd you get that? I'd say, well, Fox News, and you'd stop me, you'd cut me off at the knee. Somebody would say, that's bullshit because they lie across the board.
Right.
And then we can't even actually have a dialogue. And that's what I think is the biggest worry. That it seems to me that there doesn't seem to be, we for the first time in history, information is so atomized, and we have been able to purify our echo chambers. And so it's very easy to surround myself with people that agree with me. And pretty soon I start thinking that is the only truth.
Right.
Well, I
don't know how to get out of that.
From all the congressional hearings and all the evidence, populist conservatives, classic Americans, classical liberals are under attack, are being censored, are being targeted, are being debanked, are being harassed. So we know that the establishment has wrapped itself in a liberal garb. It has nothing to do with what they're actually doing. And they are attacking and censoring and surveilling. Because it's not just censoring. To censor, you've got to surveil. And we have the documents. We know there's been a huge campaign of suppressing populist voices that are against the establishment Washington global consensus. So let's just not lie about that. And if the pendulum starts swinging back and the right wing becomes authoritarian, like George W. Bush, I'll be against it like I was then. But right now, the big corporations posing as liberals are kicking our ass and are surveilling us and censoring us and controlling us. And we just need to get down to brass tacks and say, Go back to the Wild Wild West. Let the public make their own decisions. Turn off all the controls other than going after criminals. That's the only answer.
Stephen, I know it might not be as much fun if you agreed or were against the Twitter files, but like, are you or were against? Like, are you actually okay with what was happening with the government in Twitter?
Well, I think that's the interesting question, is nobody seems to know what the government was doing. It seems like everybody thinks that like the government was there to try to censor bad media about political opponents of Donald Trump, and that was the whole point. The real answer, I think, is that post-2016, I think there is a huge scare that online platforms are being used, especially by foreign adversaries that are misrepresenting themselves to try to change the public discourse. So the question is should our intelligence agencies be involved in any size, shape, or form in alerting social media to these things? And I think that's an interesting question. I think that there's room for communication there. There probably needs to be a lot of transparency. I know before Elon acquired Twitter, they would, for instance, they'd post a report at the end of the year showing how many government requests they got or how many they fulfilled, the percentage that they fulfilled. But I don't think the idea that the government can't communicate whatsoever or give any sort of heads up whatsoever to companies is the answer. I don't think it's very realistic. And I think there's probably ways to do that.
Let me just say this. Prior to Elon taking over, anybody knew you tried to post a medical doctor criticizing shots, you got banned. You tried to post somebody questioning an election result, whether they're right or wrong, they're banned. You try to question, you show a video of an open border, you're banned. Everybody experienced being banned. So you can gaslight people all day. They know they got suppressed for what they saw and what they did, and that's not fair. We should be able to watch all of it and decide what's real, what's fake. I'm not worried about deep fakes. Anybody can watch something and say, that's not Joe Rogan saying that. That's a deep fake. And if an idiot gets full bite, that's fine. The control over arbitrating what's real and what's not is what we should really worry about.
Yeah, and also, if I could just say, this is not just politics. I mean, to me, one of the things that's been motivating is what happened to people like Jay Bhattacharya and Kuldorf at Harvard, who were great epidemiologists who were censored by the social media companies because they had a different point of view about COVID, and they turned out to be right about the.
But Adam,
turned out to be right.
They turned out to be right.
Adam,
they weren't just censored; they were right.
Adam, speaking to what Destiny just said, like, where do you see any wiggle room for the government to reach out?
I don't think the government has a business in our speech unless it's a crime.
So, look, you go to D.C. and you have all these people from the intelligence agencies talking about there's misinformation and disinformation, and I was once corrected confusing the two.
They're the worst purveyors.
Right, and the point is, the cure is, as always, it's more information. Thank you.
Buy my pillow.
Exactly.
Did you know Jack Posobiec secretly married Mike Lindell 2 years ago in Las Vegas?
Alex, I told you that in confidence. You said you would be our witness if I paid you off.
The difference is I'm marrying him. He's mine.
I saw him first. It was that mustache. It began with that dang mustache.
It's a sexy.
At the bar there. You could talk to him if you'd like. So.
Mike Lindell's up there?
Exactly. No, don't get too excited.
Oh my God. Is Mike Lindell really here tonight?
He's been drinking some Bud Light, folks.
Sorry about that.
He's entertaining as hell. We need to get him down here. No, Jack and I battle over Mike Lindell. He was married to him for a month, me for a month. It's like a.
We're joint custody.
We're having a child. It was Super Mario Brothers.
Stephen, but about the coordinated action that Adam is discussing, I feel like that term hasn't really come up, and like that is a new phrase that I haven't heard you address.
I think what's happening is we're in a new era where there's a lot of information. There's huge platforms that have huge levers on American society for control over our elections, right? The information that propagates on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter is affecting a lot of people. There's a lot of people that watch it. There's a lot of people that make decisions based off of it. And I think social media platforms are trying to navigate this really difficult terrain of figuring out how much responsibility they feel they have to that public discourse. But I mean, the conversation is infinitely shitted up with the fake request for the Hunter Biden laptop that didn't happen, or the censoring
the Hunter
Republicans or
Biden's
whatever.
fake.
It's on the
Conspiracy.
We never
not
actually
election meddling.
We never actually
these
get to
throwaway lines. Oh, it's fake.
I'd be happy
the
to share
fake
the link,
request
man.
for Hunter Biden's laptop.
It's still on FEC.com.
Dude, you never bring the
right
goods.
there.
You just have a throwaway line and claim we're not giving it. It's real.
Okay,
it's on record.
The goods
it's criminal.
So the goods are that Elvis Chan, who was Yoel Roth's contact at the FBI, did not know that the FBI even had that laptop until the story broke, which he also testified in front of Congress about. He also testified in front of Congress that he did not. I can read you the quotes if you want the testimony, that he never brought up Hunter Biden.
So we're not sold out to China. Everything's fine, folks. Go
So what
home,
you're
go
saying
sleep.
is he was lying.
Everything's
so they
fine.
equivocated.
It's not lying. You're reading one quote and you're trying to read it in a certain way. If we
No, you're
look at
right.
the email, we can look at the emails for Twitter and we can look at the conversations that they were having internally over whether they should have censored that story or not. None
Joe
of them were
Biden
saying.
gets up
But
on
you're putting
TV
the onus. You're putting
and
the
says,
onus
I told
on
the
us.
prosecutor.
Wait, Alex. So what I'm saying is, the onus should be on the people who did the censoring, not the people who are upset about it.
Wait,
they
the
are
onus
the ones
by who? It's a private company.
By Twitter and the FBI. The onus should be on them to explain their actions to the American people. And you and I have just gone back and forth
Should
here.
every moderation action that a public that a private platform takes, do they owe the public an explanation on all of that?
No, I actually agree.
Why not?
Hunter Biden for president.
Wait, hold on. Here's a really important question.
Well, actually,
Is it
no.
possible?
Actually, in all seriousness, when you sign your terms of service to any platform, that is binding. And if you change your laws, and the courts found this out in the Alex Berenson lawsuit when they came up with the COVID strikes, and that was the policy. So they didn't follow their own policy.
In general, Section 230 protects them. Berenson was very lucky. But
He got lucky, I know, but the judge judge was able to hand it to him by saying that because they didn't follow their own policy, which he had agreed to, and just banned him outright because they felt like it, that they had actually broken their agreement with the user. So yes, they do owe it to the users.
But if I was Twitter, or if I was, my concern actually, as somebody who's a free speech advocate, I do think that we are in a unique time in history where these platforms allow information to diffuse so quickly. And you could plant a fake story if you were smart enough that could potentially turn people off to
Like
voting for a
President Trump
candidate.
lost
You mean like what the media does to Trump every week?
That is an issue, right? So if that's an issue, how do we avoid that? Well, we can go back and forth about, whether or not
having that governor on it is more dangerous.
Don't
than that.
interrupt, Brian.
Let the public figure it out. Listen, they censored Trump. Since when has a U.S. president been censored off a platform for no reason?
But you agree.
They have
Alex,
dictators on there.
Alex, you
but they
agree?
take Trump off.
You would agree, though, it is possible to float. Somebody who's creative enough can float a sensational story that all of us would go, "What?" and then change our vote.
No,
and then
I agree. So we need
can
the
I-
CIA to protect us.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that is an issue, though.
So
right?
I'm old
Yes or
enough.
no?
When I was going to the supermarket with my mom, there are all of these things called the National Enquirer and the Daily Globe with these absurd sensational
Right,
stories.
right, that's true.
Nancy Reagan is having sex with aliens and
Right.
is taking over the world.
We would get wise to it. We get wise to it. In other words.
Well, and all of the good suburban matrons were going past, looking at them and reading it.
Right.
Now, nobody thought that that was real. No one thought it was a threat to national security.
Right.
The point is, there are always these fantastic stories about famous people, and it's only when the liberals have the control to shut conservatives down do these become threats to the democracy.
Right.
And that's very dangerous.
Yeah, since when did the left become anti-free speech?
So-
Look, this is anti-American. It's antithetical to freedom. It's all a lie.
Well,
People
it's not just the left
They
that
can
does this.
confuse
I mean, like-
it all day long. No, I'm against the Republicans putting warnings on songs in the 80s. What the left's done is like the left claims the right wing's banning books. No, they don't want child porn promotion to 5-year-olds. Telling you're not going to give Penthouse magazine to a 7-year-old is not banning Penthouse. It means you don't sell it. Like not selling cigarettes to an 8-year-old is not censoring people to get cigarettes. So the left says, oh, the right wing's banning books. It's the left banning speech and surveilling us and controlling us, and we all know it, and it's allied with the corporate fascist, and it's a fraud. It's that simple.
I actually have a great example for you about that. So, so I know we do a Q&A at a certain point when we get towards the end of the panel, but I'm going to do a Q&A with the audience, right? So, Trump said that there was a way that you could cure your own COVID by drinking. Okay, you just heard that. Like, almost one guy said chlorine, but everybody else said bleach, right?
You fail.
Did Trump actually say that? No. But the media told you he did. Joe Biden told you he did.
Did he say Mexicans are bad
people?
people?
Did he ever once utter the word bleach? No. And so that happens already. I'm sorry? No, what was your comment?
Oh, yeah, no. Like, He implied that maybe that's an option.
Okay, here comes the cope. Here comes the cope. Here comes the cope, guys.
That's a good point, though. That's a good
He
point.
didn't say the word.
He
but,
was promoting.
I felt like he said
he was
the
promoting
word.
therapeutics, which we know they suppress vitamin C,
he was
vitamin
talking
D,
about ultraviolet lights.
hydroxychloroquine. They called it horse paste. And all of it was in real studies. The big pharma was suppressing real studies. People have a right to see that.
So I don't mean to get into the whole efficacy of it, but I just mean everyone in this room knew the answer to my question, and it was fake.
Right.
The whole thing was fake. Right. And so he didn't imply it. You just think he did because the TV told you to, because you let the TV do your thinking for you instead of actually listening to what actually happened. You just believe, just because you believe a lie doesn't make it right.
$100,000. Anybody gives me a video of Trump saying drink bleach. It doesn't exist. It's in your mind. Admit you were lied to.
It was a joke.
He didn't say the word bleach, seriously. It's actually funny.
Let's get ready to rumble.
Right, to your point, that was a very sensational story. It became a punchline on SNL. It became a punchline for Joe Biden throughout the rest of the campaign, and it was just a lie. It was just straight up a lie. Okay, that's not what I talked about. That has nothing to do with what I just said.
Talk about bleach, not hydroxychloroquine.
So, Stephen, you might say that the secrecy with which the government communications with Twitter, that's an issue. So you would like to see more transparency with the communications? What do you want to see?
Prior to Elon taking over Twitter, Twitter published a report at the end of the year showing the takedowns they got from the government, not exactly what they were, and then the percentage that they acquiesced to, essentially. I think that those types of reports are probably okay, but step in the right direction. I don't know if they should have
Everything's
more
fine, there's no
transparency
censorship.
Actually,
less
Stephen,
transparency or...
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I had a question
sorry,
for
go
you.
ahead.
No, I have a question for you. Just and legitimate question. I got you anything. So we're talking about the Hunter Biden deal. That was obviously a leak, sure, right? We can all say that, and you might even go so far as to say, not you, but people might go so far as to say, well, it may be in the public interest to censor this because it was public information or private information, et cetera. So there is a leak that's going on right now in the public that's come out. This gamer, 21-year-old reservist or Air National Guard.
And they tried to claim it wasn't real at first. Now they admit it's real.
They did claim it was Russian at first, but it turned out that it was real. As far as I know, and if anyone's seen differently, please let me know. Please inform me. I haven't seen anyone take down any of those documents on Twitter right now that have been posted. Now, obviously, we're post Elon owning it. We don't know, to your point about government requests, whether or not the FBI has requested to take any of that down. But I'm just interested.
Kirby did request on Thursday that social media take it down, but you're right.
So, okay, Kirby did request that?
But
you don't know if he reached out to Elon.
No, he just said
right.
He publicly said we're requesting.
So what are your thoughts? Because, I mean, obviously this has done national security damage to the U.S. Regardless of what your thoughts are on the Ukraine war or some of the other things that were in there, obviously it has done damage to U.S. operations and U.S. Clearly sources and methods, intel operations that are going on right now. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on whether or not that should be taken down or should it be reported, allowed to stay up.
I think there's fundamentally a different question between stuff that's like real and stuff that's fake. So, for instance, if we talk about like the Trump bleach story or the kitty litter story, I think there is an argument to be made that killing these kinds of stories early serves the public interest because the information is fake. Now, there's arguments on both sides to be had of that, but that would be like an argument in favor of killing those stories. I think the problem when you get into like leaked documents, especially like classified leaked documents, is if they're leaked at all, the damage is probably already done. So I don't know how effective it is to kill those stories once those documents have already seen the light.
How do you trust the people that kill the stories? Who picks them? Who are these people?
Well, it would probably be the people that run Twitter's moderation team, Alex.
Well, that'd be a really important group for authoritarians. The people that decide what's real and what's not. How about it is us?
Well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of censoring highly classified documents.
We need some magic expert.
But
Look, lies about me get told all the time.
Well,
They're
I guess
fantastic.
what I would respond.
I love them because within a few days, people first believe it. Within a few days, people figure it out. It blows up in their face. Every time the human intelligence, when they put out outrageous crap that I've personally been lied about, people wake up and figure it out very quickly.
Alex,
So what if this had happened just on this? So let's say Elon never bought Twitter. This happened. Yoel Roth is still there. His buddy Elvis Chan is still there. And then Elvis Chan comes to him and says, hey, and you remember this story was the initial story Reuters reported at one point. The initial spin was that this was Russian disinformation.
Hold on. Was that the initial spin or was that the initial thought? Because those are two highly different things. Do you think Reuters was trying to spin the story?
No. It was three unnamed officials went to Reuters and said, we believe this has all the, they always use that phrase, all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. So let's say Yoel Roth hears that and says, oh my gosh, Russian disinformation, here's his buddy Elvis Chan that he's built up all this rapport with, and decides to then go and make the unilateral decision, the same way he did with the Hunter Biden laptop, to censor these documents.
Well, he didn't, to be clear, that wasn't a unilateral decision. If it was, there would have been conversation inside the
Point
Twitter
is, the
file.
laptop's real, Jack.
The 12 people who...
Yeah, it wasn't a unilateral decision. There was a heated conversation on how to address
It's election meddling.
The question is about, would you be okay if they had going off of that information for him to then go and censor it, even though later on we find out, because obviously there are other platforms, like Telegram was really one of the big ones where this propagated, that it was real.
I think it's a really tough question. I think that there is a strong argument to be made that having some kind of coordinated effort with the U.S. government to kill certain stories that might be damaging, especially to national security interests, could be a positive thing.
You're hearing liberals
Obviously,
defend intelligence agencies controlling U.S. news. How they've taken the left over. My God, I thought Republicans were bad. Jesus
Obviously,
Christ.
on the flip side, we're going to need some sort of oversight. I don't know whether that's another government committee, whether that's a public statement made by Twitter to make sure that that process isn't being abused, because you don't want them killing stories that are just politically inconvenient.
It'll always be abused, though.
Yeah,
it'll always be abused by either side. Won't it? How do you avoid that?
Well, that's like
Let him talk. I know you got blue hair, but you only get half the time. Go ahead.
So, I mean, since the Patriot Act, the huge, enormous intelligence community has been turned inward, looking at foreign interference in our press. And that is viewed as somehow actionable. And they have used that, of course, as a springboard to monitor a huge amount of lawful speech by Americans. I don't know why we're so afraid of foreign propaganda. I mean, what's going to happen? If we hear, nothing's going to happen.
What do you mean nothing's going to happen?
They also label American powerful speech as foreign.
I thought you wanted this guy to talk.
And the point is, the best thing the government can do is say, look, we believe X, Y, and Z are actually working at the behest of the Russian government. You decide whether they're making good arguments. I mean, sometimes propaganda is right. Americans should be able to make the decision. And what happens when you decide, oh, this is a danger to national security, we have to suppress this? It's just an invitation to the whole, gobbledygook.
Now we become China, because China says,
to some
we
extent,
censor
though,
stuff to protect
from a legal
things.
point of view, like some of it is done illegally. Right? You can't misrepresent yourself as a U.S. citizen and then create a corporation in the United States for the purpose of spreading speech to influence elections. That's an illegal thing, right?
Then let's enforce the law. I mean, I'm fine with that.
Well,
Dude, I've been blamed in congressional hearings to work with the Russians. I've never been to Russia. Nobody controls a goddamn thing I do, including me. So the idea that I'm controlled by fucking Russians is a lie, and I'm sick of it.
Alex, does part of you enjoy the Streisand effect that you receive from being
I love
banned?
the Streisand effect, but I ain't working for no goddamn Russians. I mean, I watch congressional hearings. Jones is a Russian asset that puts out Russian information. I just watch the news and say, I think this is BS. No damn Russians like tapping me on the shoulder going, little devil, like Putin's right there. What do I do, Putin? Oh, say this. It's ridiculous, man. And that's how what he just said. They've turned the entire intelligence apparatus that they used in the Cold War to take our liberties. Then it was take the Muslims' liberties they used against us, and now we're all terrorists. And everybody knows the intelligence agencies in any country that falls turn inward on their people and claim their people are agents of a foreign power. The Russians can't wipe their asses intelligence-wise. The Russians are having their ass kicked in Ukraine right now. The communist Chinese have got their act together and are basically taking us over. I'm just sick of hearing that the Russians control me. It's a lie, man.
True. Okay. So to follow up on that train of thought, I'm curious. Let's say that the government did publicly say, the government says, we think that this is propaganda. Wouldn't people like you be up here arguing then that they're still making then implicit threats against those people or on those platforms, like you said earlier? Like, let's say the government comes out and identifies like 10 or 15 different accounts as being propaganda. Let's say 1 or 2 of them get banned because they do break the TOS. Wouldn't we be right back on this panel saying the government was essentially threatening those social media platforms to ban those people?
I mean, possibly, but at least we could have a public discussion about it.
Do we block what Kim Jong-un says? We laugh at him. I mean, we're like, oh, North Korea says Kim Jong-un makes the birds sing. F him.
There's a guy.
I'm going to let you guys take over. I love you. It's been a great panel. But I'm just telling you, censorship, and America will defeat the globalists. Infowars.com.
Only in Texas, folks. Only in Texas.
I was going to say, we'll see you later.
Yeah, no, what I was going to bring up, though, because you talk about going after, like, threats against specific accounts, and this one doesn't... I'm sorry? Okay. And no, I'm all about being interactive. It's cool. And there is a situation. There's a 33-year-old man right now named Doug Mackey, who, now, this was not censored on Twitter, but he posted a meme that disparaged Hillary Clinton and her supporters in 2016 using his constitutional rights. He was just convicted in a federal court for posting his meme, and he is now currently awaiting sentencing for potentially up to 10 years in prison for posting a meme in an election.
What is he charged with?
He is charged with infringing rights. Conspiracy to infringe rights.
The Ku Klux Klan Act, which was
it's the KKK Act,
which was passed after the Civil War and intended against the KKK when they were actually, lynching people and preventing them from voting.
Well, yeah, I'm curious. What was the claim that he was trying to do? Like, obviously, it has to go beyond just the meme because a ton of people post negative memes about.
The memes actively discourage people from voting.
You didn't see the meme?
I know that there are laws on the books, for instance, so...
there was more to it than
so here's something, because I've heard stories like this brought up before.
It was a text-to-vote thing.
This is the only time this has ever been done.
Well, hold on. My understanding is that in the United States, I don't believe it's the only time. I think in the United States, if you give misleading information about where to vote, I think that's a federal election crime.
Right.
Yeah, so if he was doing that, then it wasn't just a meme. If he was saying, text this to vote or go here to vote, I believe that is a crime in the United States.
That was a legit crime.
You're cool with a guy going to jail for memes?
No, hold on. It wasn't just for memes.
Yeah, but intent matters.
It was a text. It was a text. It was a text to vote.
Yeah.
So do you think that people actually texted this thing thinking that they were voting? For example,
I know that's a law. That's the only thing I would say. Is that
I will say
there.
that after I believe 6 years of investigation, the federal government was not able to find one person. Not one person.
It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters. If I go out and if I were to draw a poster,
but I'm not asking about them. I'm asking you.
Right. I would say
you couldn't find one person who bought it who actually fell for that meme.
I have no ideas. I would just say that if that's a law, I can understand why they brought that case. Then his lawyers can fight it out in court. My thing is, where I agree with you guys, is when you have any.
That's like Soviet Union stuff, man. You're like, oh, they could fight it in court. That's no big deal.
No, what I'm saying is that he was convicted, or at least he's been charged with.
He's convicted.
Election
he's
fraud.
convicted. He's convicted.
But that's election fraud.
No, it's not.
It may not be. I'm just telling you that's
constitutionally protected American speech.
But it was a vote. It was a text-to-vote thing that they were able to. They won that case, so I don't know.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean,
what I'm saying is the biggest threat is this, and I agree with you guys. If you have a council, and I don't care what council that is now, I don't care who those experts are. If you have a council that decides what is to be censored and what is not to be censored, that to me is dangerous. I do think it has to be left to the people to decide. And I do think that we'll eventually learn, and we are learning in real time, how to take everything with a grain of salt until we can prove it. And we won't be so fast to act. I think the marketplace will figure out a way to say, here comes this story. Is it true? Is it true? And there'll probably be a whole industry that'll sprout up that we can rely on. And I think if you let the marketplace do their work, you will have companies that will earn the public's trust. And they will be the ones to say, this is bullshit or this is real.
I wish we lived in this utopia that you're describing.
Don't we have that already, though?
No,
so wait,
where?
Okay.
Well, so if a story's floated and it's bullshit, what we all rely on is essentially the consensus, even though it's mainstream media. Usually we figure out, that was a lie. So the Steele dossier, for example, right? We kind of go, sometimes we're like, wait a minute, is this holy shit? The Russians have all this stuff on them? This is crazy. And then pretty soon somebody goes, it was bullshit. And it
took a long time.
It took a long time, but this is the world we're living in.
It took years. It took millions of dollars of investigations based on a complete lie.
Right.
It would use to hamper the President of the United States, which is essentially an internal coup against the elected President of the United States.
What would we do about that, though?
That was being done. What would you do is that you wouldn't let the deep state and these national security agencies determine the actions of the duly elected president. You'd allow him to do his job.
How do we do that?
You don't listen to bullshit.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not an answer.
The federal government.
No,
you don't allow the federal government to be able to come in and
I agree with you.
launch these crazy investigations based on this, and that
they're gonna investigate,
in order to get back on it. I'm sorry.
Too many bureaucrats.
Yeah, that's true.
And honestly, what I would do is I would start by locking up some of those people, like Mueller, like Christopher Steele, like these people that launched all of this.
What is the crime?
Well, you just said conspiracy to infringe rights. So they infringed the rights.
When he was elected as a special prosecutor, his goal was to go and infringe the rights of
They infringed the rights of every single person in every single state that Trump won to have the president that they elected.
This is not a real crime. You're not speaking of a real crime.
Okay,
also,
you were just cool with the guy getting thrown in for memes.
To go back, well, hold on.
You're
so
totally fine with that.
Hold on. So to be fair, okay, because I looked this up now because I'm curious. So one, according to federal authorities, almost 5,000 voters fell for the texting ruse. It wasn't zero. I don't know if you got that.
No, that's
Number
not
one.
true. That's not
Number
true.
two.
That's not true. They found numbers who texted it, not who fell for it.
Number two, he was
not one
convicted by
person
a
testified.
jury of his peers.
He was
convicted on a jury. It wasn't just a government censorship or just a judge that did it. He lost in court.
No, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, that is not.
No, well, the first thing you said is not true. Not one person testified that they fell for this.
No one's ever
not true.
Why would a person have to testify that they? That's not how it
Most of those
works.
texts were obviously
Literally,
jokes.
you need
Republican
evidence at
texting.
trial. That's how trials work.
The evidence, the crime wasn't did you trick somebody. The crime was did you try to trick somebody.
Then why did you just bring up that number?
Because that number was what federal investigators said that they'd found in the course of their investigation.
Okay, but you just admitted that it's extraneous.
Look, the point.
No, it's extraneous to the conviction.
Then why did they bring it up?
Because you brought it up first by saying that nobody was tricked, which is not relevant.
The point is,
it was relevant in the discussion of his point that they were infringing on rights.
That no government has ever interpreted that law to include parodic jokes that nobody, really would take seriously and arguably was not intended sacredly.
Okay, guys.
And that mere speech had never been used in such an extensive way. Really, any fair reading of the history of the law was for physical intimidation, threats of force, threats of violence, or clear physical efforts to confuse people. And it was a very dangerous thing when the government took this extraordinary step of taking a meme 4 years later. And just as a little backstory about the way Washington works, it was filed like the month Trump left. Because the lawyers at DOJ had been working on the suit for 4 years and been waiting for Trump to get out of office.
But it wasn't a meme, though, right? He wasn't convicted technically for a meme.
Yeah, 100% convicted for a meme.
Okay,
Yes.
guys, we're gonna go to Q&A,
Yes.
and they'll probably come up in Q&A.
So, which was a joke. So
here we go.
The question is, do you want to live in a country where people can go to jail over jokes?
No.
Well, it's unclear what his intent was. I don't. Can you speak to that?
The jury did not find it as a joke.
Okay, guys,
The
we're
jury
over
was
here.
not able to find any.
All right, guys, we're over here. Let's
question of
start
intent.
question one.
Oh, we got it.
Is NPR a state-funded, and should any other media organization entity receive the same amount of funding?
I think that you should have labels on every single corporate Twitter account based on how they're funded. All of them. Well, corporate or government.
So I think the issue specifically with NPR is, my understanding is NPR and PBS are state-funded, but they're not state-ran. And that's a key difference because people will point to things like the BBC or NPR and they'll say, oh, well, these are state-run media. That's not true. They're state-funded, as opposed to, say, Russia Today, which is state-funded and state-ran, meaning that the state dictates the agenda of the media. It's a huge difference.
Yeah. Maybe there should be separate labels.
I agree.
So
there
just
should
put
be,
the label. I think they did change the label for NPR and BBC, didn't they?
All right, next question.
I think it says government. I think it says public funded.
It says publicly funded.
I thought
yeah.
they were upset. I thought the reason why they wanted to pull it because it said state-ran media. I thought
No,
that's what
they
did.
changed it.
They changed
Oh,
it.
did they change it?
They changed
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this pertains to censorship and content moderation. Is not freedom of reach, freedom of speech. So if somebody turns down the volume on what I say so that no one effectively hears what I say, is that not the same thing as just stopping me from talking in the first place? That's for everybody.
I think it's a hard question. So, for instance, do you have a right to somebody else's platform as part of your freedom of speech? If I were to build a megaphone big enough that people were to use, do you have a right to my megaphone just because I've built it and I've made it available to other people? I think there's a strong argument to be made that the social media companies have gotten large enough that there probably needs to be some sort of consideration or special consideration given to them, because it does feel like if you get banned off 3 or 4 platforms, you are effectively completely delisted in U.S. society. But it has to be a more sophisticated conversation than just revoking Section 230 for every single social media company.
Yeah,
Completely agree.
Technologies
That's
from the
mine,
telegraph to the telephone, they were required by law to be provided to everyone, so everyone could enjoy them. And I think the same rule applies to social media. We can't have a certain elite saying, these are ours, sorry people, you can't use it, when we've done the opposite for telephones and telegraphs, and it's worked fine.
Wait, is that true?
Yes.
Is it, if I wanted to buy telephone service, the company is obligated to sell it to me? They can't say no to a customer?
Yeah, it's called common carrier.
Okay, gotcha. But internet service providers don't have common carrier status, right? Okay,
not
gotcha.
yet.
Okay, gotcha.
Go for it.
Thanks for all being here, guys. I wanted to ask, today we just have this justice system that really assumes guilt and has to be proven innocent. What should we be doing to actually get back to being innocent until proven guilty? And is social media part of that problem?
Yes, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem because what happens is the minute you're accused of something, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. What happens is every corporate sponsor you have and everybody you have business with stops doing business with you because they all go too sticky. So that's a huge problem. So due process is dead for a lot of people because the minute somebody comes up and says, you did this, and the problem with that is that that person gets a story and you get a statement, and you're fucked. So if you are in a certain industry and somebody makes an accusation about you, see you later. And it doesn't matter how old that accusation is. It could be 30 years old, but go fuck yourself because every corporate sponsor goes, I can't, sorry, love you, but we can't do it. And that's a huge problem. So anybody who thinks we still live in a society where you have, and what it does, it creates an atmosphere of terror. People are terrified because I'll tell you something. Everybody's going to choose paying their mortgage and sending their kids to school and feeding their kids over a higher principle. And I don't blame people for doing that because that is the biggest problem with social media. And I see it all the fucking time in Hollywood, all the time. And there's no way you can fight it. And people just go, yeah, and everybody feels ashamed and hangs their head, even when they fucking know that this person is innocent. And it could be in anything. And we see it all the time. And so I don't know what to do about that problem. I really don't. But until corporations go, hey, we believe in due process. And if you believe that, if you want to cancel somebody, you're next. You're next. And the only thing standing in the way is the organization in power, which switches all the time, is going to favor you, or it's going to kind of gloss it over and move on to the next person they don't agree with. And that's the biggest threat, I think, right now. I see it all the time. And I see too many people's lives get ruined as a result.
The biggest one most recently, speaking to what you're saying, is Johnny Depp.
Listen, man, I got 1,000 friends, including myself. You know, I've fucking, all of them, yeah.
But we don't all exactly have the same kind of resources Johnny Depp does to fight back.
Exactly.
And that's the thing.
Exactly. And cancel culture is very real. And what it means is all of a sudden you can't work and you got to sell your house and your kids have to say goodbye to your dog because you can't find a place. I've seen this with my own eyes in Hollywood. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a reason, though, that one of the reasons that I err on the side of allowing for more open social media, because if you've at least got a platform somewhere, if you've got your followers, if you got people who have your back, if you have people that'll at least listen to your side, then you can get something going. Then you can get something going and push back, or at least have people to fall back on if times do get tough and all those labels want to pull out.
Yeah, if you're a podcaster, if you're a comic, if you're certain parts you can weather certain storms.
Right.
If you're just an actor, if you're just a director, if you're just a producer, if you're just an agent, if you just work at Netflix as an executive, we'll see you later, and nobody's going to touch you. And all it takes is a story. It doesn't have to have any corroborating evidence. And you have a lot of activists and press who are looking for clicks because they don't make any money, and they got to figure out a way to make a story out of this.
Yeah.
So the temptation, it's a systemic problem. It's a real issue. And I like the Whisper Network. Personally, I think the Me Too movement, in a lot of ways, is a good movement because I like fair play. And I also saw a lot of women deal with a lot of bullshit. I've been in that business for 30 fucking years. And I saw women have to eat all the dicks, no pun intended. I really did. And it sucked for them, and they had no way to fight back. And the minute they made one argument, the male Whisper Network canceled them, and that happened forever in Hollywood. And it wasn't until 2017 that Harvey Weinstein and the monsters got taken down, and all those shitheads got put on notice. But with every revolution, it will eat its young. You better be careful. And because the pendulum, Americans have so much trouble being in the middle. We have to swing one way or the other. And I think that's the biggest threat. And I don't have a solution for it. I really don't.
I think hitting on the last thing you said there, I think the problem with cancel culture is it's not social media driven. I think it's just driven by who we are as people. Yeah. I think that people aren't capable fundamentally of having so much information thrown in front of their faces. Like, I think we're built for, what is it, like 50 friends, I think is like sociologically, right. Like how many you're able to keep at one point in time. If you show me like a Twitter feed and you put a story up of some guy and I see a headline, like 99.9% of us aren't even reading the fucking story. We see the headline, oh, that guy, I guess probably rapist, and then click off and then next, and that's it. And that's the only thing we do. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a thing, because when we talk about cancel culture, it's not really driven by social media companies. It's not even really driven by corporations. I think it's driven by people's just binary view of other people. And when you've got unlimited access into people's lives and you can see any mistake or any error or any reported issue with that person, it's very easy to flip a switch in your head and go, fuck that guy, I hate that guy, I'm not going to support these companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know, that's something that we have to get over.
I do wish corporations would say, let us look at the evidence first.
The real thing is, I think corporations need to fucking have a backbone. Because, are people really going to boycott fucking Nestle or Pepsi or Coke because they sponsor some guy that had a thing? Like, I don't think it'll happen. Right. But corporations buckle so fast because they're so worried that, like, something is going to blow over, and destroy their, All
right, let's bust through a bunch here.
Okay, first, I feel like I need to make a public confession and commend Mr. Ottman. It appears the other day in the lobby of the Hyatt, I told him to get out of my seat. And he did not say, don't you know who I am? I think he deserves a hand for the grace that he did.
Bill Ottman, ladies and gentlemen.
Bill, why are you sitting in his seat, man?
An American hero.
Well, anyway.
He's a big man.
Handsome. He's tall, thin, and handsome.
He's got a cane, too.
I have been involved in Republican politics for quite a few years, to the extent that so far this spring I've met and talked to 3 presidential candidates. I'll probably meet another one in another week. I'm on a first-name basis with half the members of the House in my state. The Secretary of State of my state calls me Dan. The governor recognizes me by sight, and I've had lunch with both of my senators more than once. So I think I have a fair appraisal of the Republican rank and file thought in flyover land. And I've been hearing tonight what Republicans think, and my reaction was, really? Not to people I run around with. So I would like to ask Destiny the source of his knowledge of what Republican rank and file think.
About what particular issue, I guess?
Any of them.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about Twitter files, I'm going to be talking about Taibbi's reporting. I'm going to be talking about what Republican lawmakers or, I guess, people on Twitter or YouTube are saying. If we're talking about, I mean, it's just going to depend on the thing. But I guess I'd need like 1 or 2 examples, or just like one example, I guess, of what exactly we're talking about.
I was talking about when you just said, this is what Republicans think.
What was it? What was I talking about? This is what Republicans think. What was that in reference to?
It was closer earlier in the evening.
I think Alex Jones scrambled all of our brains a little bit. I wish I could remember specifically, but I try to. Wait, what did you say?
It's all right. Just the next one.
Okay.
With all the talk about TOS flagging, why have none of the free speech warriors tonight talked about the Elon Twitter censoring on behalf of the Modi government?
I think a lot of people are actually upset about that. You watched Sagar and Crystal were really pissed at at him for doing. I mean, Elon has successfully enraged both the mainstream and independent media now. Like, banning the Substack was a bad move. I think that it was probably impulsive, and he didn't really think it through, and he'll probably apologize for it.
I want to thank Minds for hooking it up with a ticket tonight. My name is Rachel. I'm with the Liberty Broadcast. We broadcast here in Austin, and I just was wondering, what is it going to take to get us all on kind of like I'm watching you through the night, and I agree with this gentleman. You've been on every panel all night long, and I just have watched you harden and harden and harden more. And I'm hearing you yell out conspiracy theorist and Alex Jones and all of this stuff. And I feel like this side of the table is willing to sit down and have a conversation, but I feel like you're okay with just dismissing things like Hunter Biden laptop. There was proof of that. The Twitter files. There were emails sent. I mean, we can't just dismiss these facts. You know, what is it going to take? A decentralized platform, you know, social media platform where everybody gets a chance, and there's not, you know, this.
I don't know that
Elon
he was
Musk.
dismissing things. He seems to have been. Well, he seems to have been taking on all these subjects in good faith.
But I've heard him yell. Conspiracy theorist. Let me you rock up so hard.
Let me explain. Okay, here, this is my issue. Okay, this is what I hate about alternative politics is that oftentimes there are so many super organizations built up that the listener at the end of the day, you guys have no idea what the you're supposed to do. There's nothing actionable. And if you're just listening to political commentators that are feeding you fear, that are feeding you resignation, that are telling you that the entire what? That's fine that if you don't agree with it. That's what Alex Jones said. Rewind the tape. Go to rumble.com/live/destiny. You can watch the whole thing again. That's exactly what he told you. I asked him specifically. I specifically asked the question because I ask everybody this question. What do you want people to do? And that's really important.
So
what do you want people to do about it?
He's like, you use words like conspiracy theory.
Alex, what do people do about it? What do you want people to do about it?
I want people to be aware of what's going
not
on.
be aware. What do you want people to do about it? You've made them aware. Now what are they supposed to do?
People.
This is the problem with your platform.
Let me talk.
All you're
You're trying to.
I'm sorry. I thought you were doing this for like 15 years. I thought you'd have a quick answer to that.
If my platform's so weak, why are they trying to ban it?
Yeah, go ahead. What do you want people to do?
What are you gonna do, boy?
What do you want people to do, Alex?
I'm gonna wreck the New World Order. That's what I'm gonna do.
Okay. No, who the conversation? Who cares about a conversation? What we need at the end of the day is you need no, lady. You guys have had conversations about this shit for a decade. What are you gonna do about it? Right? You have to do more than talk. You either have to. You've got to.
But he's talking.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of discrediting this engagement. Like, I feel like overall it's been pretty positive.
I don't need you to defend me, okay? Listen, okay? I took my fan base out. I spent $150,000 of my money, and I took my fan base out, and we went to canvass for political candidates because I think that's important, right? Encouraging people to register to vote, encouraging people to get involved in the local communities. These are the types of actions.
Exactly.
These are the types of actions that are going to change the political landscape. The guy up here, the Republican guy that came up here that said he hated me or whatever, or I don't know if he said that. That guy. Sure. Stop. That guy that came up here, from all the personal relationships he's developed, sounds like he's had more political effectiveness than 99% of the people in this room. But it's because he's getting involved on a local level. But if all you do is tell people that the CIA, the NSA, the government, the deep state, that all of these things are out to get you, then at the end of the day, what are you going to do? You're not going to vote. You're not going to get involved in the process.
Excuse me. I mean,
but would you agree that he's having a conversation though? He is engaging, isn't he? He's not? He's not engaging? Wait. Hold on. All he's saying, I probably agree with most of the people. Listen to me. All he's saying is that it's one thing to speak and have a bunch of talking points. It's another thing to come up with actionable things that make a difference. That's the hard part. So all of us can sit here and talk about this.
That wasn't her question. Wait, but that wasn't her question. Like, what are you doing? You're defending him. Okay, cool. But her question was, why were you just attacking people as conspiracy theorists or saying something's fake when people could question?
Well,
again, that's what you're doing.
Because they are.
But she's asking.
Alex is a conspiracy theorist.
so she's asking.
I think he'd even say it.
Am I crazy?
Right, so
I mean, I like him. He's a nice guy, but I mean, he's a conspiracy theorist.
Right, so,
that's his whole brand.
Right. So when you dismiss people, when you dehumanize people, like you just dehumanized Alex Jones
I'm not dehumanizing
on the stage.
I'm not. I
you
like
just
him.
treated him as lesser than a person.
I did not. Just not me.
You treated him like lesser than a person to
All I
do
said
that.
was his brand is conspiracy.
Everything he says is fear.
not
everything he
saying
says is
that.
anger.
I didn't
It's
say
all
that. I didn't say
conspiracies.
that.
No, I'm saying that's what he said. But then you just agreed with it.
Right.
And her point is that when you use that kind of language, like you just did, that turns off all the people that might be interested in hearing what you're saying because you come across like kind of a jerk.
Right, I got you. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
Can you guys hear me?
I think you're right. I think the biggest thing, you're absolutely right. I think the biggest thing you have to do is draw common ground first and say, what's the problem we're all trying to solve? And give each other the credit to say, look, so let's take gun control. We don't like spree shooters. Everybody hates spree shooters. Everybody doesn't like somebody who comes in and just massacres everybody. Let's at least agree there. Let's honor the fact that we're both trying to solve a problem, even if you're on this side or that side. And you're right. And I think that's very important to not just say, you're a gun nut, well, you're a pussy. You know, that's what you hear, and then the conversation's over, right? So I think to your point, I think you're absolutely right. You've got it. But I do think Destiny is at least engaging, wouldn't you say? He's not.
All right, go to the next.
I give Destiny all. Wait.
Go to the next.
Go to the next.
Back here
I give him all the credit in the world for being
over you right now, but
for being here. Seriously, I do.
Seriously.
Sorry. What's that?
Sorry about that. So I'll try to make it quick. To Destiny's point about what do you want to do about it? I heard a lot of people say that we have to have the government censor people, we can't have Twitter censor people, but nobody ever talks about whether or not a company has First Amendment rights when it comes to free association. So if you want to have a certain rule in place for Twitter, Facebook, Rumble, I don't give a shit, whatever you use for social media, how would you go about that without violating the First Amendment freedom of association section that is as it is currently understood? Thank you.
I'm happy to
Defer to the lawyer.
take that one. Lunch counters can claim that they have a First Amendment right not to include, blacks or whites or whomever because of their expression as a, white lunch counter. We don't accept that. We accept that that businesses have basic non-discrimination obligations. In California, that includes, not discriminating against political groups you don't like, as in Virginia, as in the Virgin Islands, as in the city of Seattle. So we're just applying these principles that every other business in the world has to apply to social media, and that's not wrong. Number two, and it's a deeper question, is nobody looks at Twitter and it's like, oh, I want to see what Elon Musk feels about what my mother just posted. No, you go to social media to see the views and expressions of your friends and family. The social media as a whole is not like the local news that presents an editorial. It's more like the telephone company. The telephone company doesn't present a view, doesn't have any First Amendment rights either.
Well, hold on. I feel like for what you just talked about, when you talk about like discriminating on like race and stuff, those are like defined protected classes. I don't think political speech is like a defined protected class in the federal government. I don't think in California it's defined as a protected class.
Oh well, you're right. I never said it was defined by the federal government.
But I'm saying like Twitter right now, as it stands, I don't think Twitter can ban you from the platform for being black. I don't think they can do that.
Yes, they can. In fact, I was arguing in court with Twitter's lawyer, who said we have the right to get rid of all gay people. And then he said, of course we wouldn't do that, Your Honor. But they say they have the right to do it.
It's a private company, you mean?
It's a private company.
My understanding.
Okay, guys, we gotta go to the next question. Sorry.
Trust the lawyer.
But this does fall under common carrier laws.
Okay, so
you would need a new legislation to apply it.
So Twitter has more or less adopted a combination of FARA and open source information to label news media platforms. There was the big thing about NPR being labeled state media, which I think is hilarious. So considering that Congress and the Subversive Activities Control Board established a rubric to determine if a U.S.-based political party or organization was classifiable as subversive, would it be a violation of free speech principles to label the social media accounts of those people involved in political strategies developed by foreign states, such as the Venezuelan government-affiliated Party for Socialism and Liberation, Workers' World Party, and Black Lives Matter?
My understanding is the illegality comes from misrepresenting themselves. So, like, if you have an account called, like, I'm the Russian media account, and then I'm starting to post stuff, even if it's misinformation about the United States, I think that's on the up and up. You're okay to do that. I think the problem is when they misrepresent themselves as U.S. citizens or U.S. entities.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Although, I would be that's an interesting, difficult issue you put your finger on. There's two sides of it. On one side, government's just disclosing information. That's good and helpful. On the other hand, if they abuse it and you are unfairly labeled as a subversive, that's chilling on speech. So I hate to be lawyers, that's a tough line to draw. I could see regimes in which they were fully transparent and which people had the right to dispute and challenge their designations as being fair, but it's ripe for abuse.
All right, we got like 3 more minutes.
And by far, we should say, by the way, while we're here, that the government that spreads the most foreign disinformation about their political adversaries is the United States government. Throughout the Middle East, throughout Eastern Europe. I mean, this is very, very clear.
My question, maybe you've already partly answered it. Do you think the Twitter files were handled correctly? And if not, what would you do in the future to prevent whatever wrongdoing happened with the Twitter files?
I would honestly, this is something where I disagreed with the strategy. I would have loved to see much more of an open source database where people could go into and, take off people's personal, email addresses, phone numbers, that kind of thing. But I didn't like the idea that even though we got a lot of emails, there was still this filter of the people who were there. So to Destiny's point, maybe there were emails that we don't know, right? We just literally don't know what we don't know. And I would have much preferred a more transparent version.
And we have nothing about the present as well. We have nothing about the present day situation. Like, what's the conversation with Twitter, between Twitter and the government, like today?
I'd love to know.
Also, because nothing seemed to have happened, right? Like, we get all this information, and I always worry that you find all this stuff out, and then we just move on to the next subject, and everybody gets away with it, and nothing happens, Right.
All right, last question.
So this question is for Jack.
Cool.
You're a conservative, principled defender of free speech. You're a critic of government overreach. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to publicly condemn, based on reporting from the Twitter files, Matt Taibbi, Michael Schellenberger, testimony before Congress.
Condemn them?
Say what?
To condemn them?
To condemn the authoritarian censorship of Twitter by Donald Trump and the Trump White House during his presidency.
When Trump asked them to take down like a negative comment, or someone in the Trump White House asked him to take down a negative comment.
Sure. Or when Matt Taibbi said.
I think it was silly, yeah.
Well, no, is it silly or is it censorship?
It's not the same thing as taking down the Hunter Biden laptop. No, it's not authoritarian.
I didn't ask you if it was the same. I asked you if it was authoritarian censorship and if you'd be willing to condemn it.
I'm glad that Twitter didn't do it. Yeah, I think it was a stupid move.
Was it wrong for him to request it?
I don't think Twitter or anybody should be requesting takedowns on Twitter. 100%.
Including the sitting president of the United States.
If it's Donald Trump, if it's me, if it's you, I don't care.
And what about when Taibbi said in the first Twitter files that the Trump White House made multiple requests? It wasn't just the Chrissy Teigen tweet. It was multiple requests. Was it wrong? Will you publicly condemn it?
Well,
he already did.
I literally just said I agree. Okay. They shouldn't have done that.
All right. All right, give everyone a round of applause.
Yeah, Trump was wrong.
Just want to say, folks, had a great night. Thank you to Bill. Thank you to Minds. Folks, you have to remember that a chimp in the state of nature will never masturbate, but when you put it in a cage, it will.
Promo code Tanya. Promo code Tanya.
Thank you guys for coming out to Minds Fest. How about a round of applause for this panel, for all the panelists today, and for the people who